cover program goals, general duties, onboarding expectations, chain of command, schedules and requesting time off, attendance policy and college school schedules, curriculum and preparation activities, safety policy, ethical conduct and confidentiality, property of Victorium Learning Center, professional development, compensation benefits and expectation, professionalism, disciplinary process, personal device policy, breastfeeding policy, and employment policies. Program goals. Goal 1. It is the goal of Victorium Learning Center to provide high-quality care and education to children and families within the Miami Valley. Goal 2. It is the goal of Victorium Learning Center to provide a safe and healthy environment in which children may flourish. Goal 3. It is the goal of Victorium Learning Center to provide a stable and nurturing environment with which the community, children, and families will rely on. General duties. You may or may not have worked in an education environment previously, but here at Victorium Learning Center, what is important and non-negotiable is safety and education. Keeping children safe is our number one priority. This may be easily accomplished by providing active supervision. Supervision tends to be thought of as being physically present, whereas active supervision entails being present in the moment. Actively engaging children in their environment and supporting their educational growth through play makes for the best possible outcome. A large portion of the responsibilities of Victorium Learning Center involve cleaning and sanitizing. Following the cleaning schedule and checklists associated with opening and closing duties is critical to limiting the spread of communicable disease. This prevents the children from being sick as well as the entire Victorium Learning Center family. All employees are required to perform cleaning duties regardless of shift worked. The cleaning schedule clearly provides a map that covers the entire operational day. Whether an opener, midday, or closer, cleaning duties are assigned and therefore expected to be completed. Social media is wonderful, engaging, and a major part of life in the 21st century. The devices utilized to visit these wonderful platforms may be educational, but also may be a barrier to active supervision. Therefore, if an electronic device is to be utilized in support of an approved lesson plan, the device must be utilized and then stored in a safe location. Personal devices may not be utilized in the Learning Center while in the care of children. In the event of an emergency, contacts may be given the center's phone number to call. Flexibility is paramount in the early childhood education industry. While permanent assignments to specific learning environments is our goal, the needs of the center and children must be considered at all times. Lower enrollment on a given day may necessitate the shortening or cancellation of scheduled shifts, as well as assignment in a different learning environment. Onboarding expectations. New hires will complete the appropriate background check procedures. If previously employed in childcare, the hire will update their employment information in Okra and then request a background check for our program. You may find your site through a search function in Okra. If not previously employed in childcare or within the past 5 years, complete the web check process at our authorized agent. Once the background check has been completed, follow the instructions in the new hire packet to include registering for all required professional development to begin employment, complete employee physical prior to your first day, and complete all state and federal paperwork. Employees must complete their professional development to Tier 3 within the biennium period listed within their individual profile. Between Okra and our in-person professional development opportunities, there is no excuse to having this expectation completed. Chain of command. The Victorium Learning Center chain of command begins with the floater, up to the assistant teacher, up to the lead teacher, up to the person in charge, up to the director, up to the manager of compliance and quality control, and then finally to the director of operations. All situations should be solved at the lowest link on the chain possible prior to moving on to the next level. Prior to engaging ownership on any matter, the director of operations must be notified. Failure to follow this procedure may involve disciplinary action up to and including termination. Schedules and requesting time off. In order to provide consistency and care for students and families enrolled in our program, Victorium Learning Center utilizes a consistent schedule Monday through Friday and will only deviate in the event of an accepted request for time off or a shift in the needs of the center. Requests are to be made as early as possible and will be granted if the needs of the center are met, regardless of the timing of the request. If your time off is denied, you will be notified. The Director of Operations will make every attempt to grant all requests. However, in a situation where 2 or more faculty members request the same time frame, a decision will be made and communicated appropriately, typically first come, first served. Schedules are communicated individually and are not to be altered without the expressed, written consent of the Director of Operations. Switching of shifts must be approved as well. Attendance expectations. Employees are required to maintain less than 4% absenteeism rate during their employment with Victorium Learning Center. Regardless of a planned absence or unplanned, attendance may be counted. Employees must remain ready to work at the beginning of their shift, and any delay is to be communicated directly and immediately to the center administrator. In the event 2 consecutive absences are recorded by an employee, a note from a medical professional must be transmitted to the center director. This is in an effort to ensure the employee is fit to return to duty. In the event of a no-call, no-show, the employee has 24 hours to communicate to the center director. After 24 hours of no communication, the employee will be assumed to have abandoned their job. The transaction will be recorded as a resignation. Excessive tardiness will be handled in the manner of including, but not limited to, verbal warning, written warning, reduction or reconfiguration of assigned work hours, leave without pay, and termination. Those who at the end of a calendar year have 0% to 2% recorded absences and less than 5 occurrences of tardiness will be recognized and rewarded in an individualized manner. College and school schedules. Victorium Learning Center supports higher education and training opportunities for all employees, regardless of the intended career path. To provide the high-quality care and education we commit to children and families, it is imperative that all employees furnish certified class schedules for requirements prior to the start of classes to allow program administrators the opportunity to establish flexible work schedules to support the educational values of staff. Employees who are relieved from their duty to attend classes during normally scheduled shifts are also required to provide certified copies of credits following final exams. Employees who do not provide certified copies of class schedules will not be removed from work schedules and therefore expected to be present and in the moment at their assigned duty location. Employees who do not furnish certified copies of credits earned will be terminated with cause for violation of this policy. Curriculum and preparation activities. The curriculum structure employed by Victorium Learning Center follows the Learn Through Play method. We utilize the creative curriculum both for infants, toddlers and twos, and preschool. Engaged faculty members who are actively supervising children will be able to assist students in conversations, redirection, and appropriate social interactions with not only other students, but faculty members as well. Lesson plans are to be completed by Wednesday, the week prior to implementation, and given to the director for review. This allows administration ample opportunity to review, comment, adjust, and purchase necessary lesson plan items. Support is available in planning developmentally appropriate activities and will be extended after request or repeated edits on lesson plans turned into administration. Disciplinary procedures may be enacted if expectations are not met regarding lesson plan preparation and adherence to daily schedules as it relates to program curriculum. Safety policy. Safety of students is our number one priority. All actions made by employees and contractors of Victorium LLC must act in the best interest of the children, families, faculty members, and company at all times. Emergency plans are in place regarding situational occurrences and are posted by the door of the classroom and in large common areas. In any instance, when in doubt, consult the center director or the person in charge prior to making decisions that affect the well-being of stakeholders in the program. Victorium Learning Center strives to provide a program that helps children become happy, responsible, cooperative participants in the program through positive, non-threatening guidance techniques. Positive guidance in our program has 2 primary goals. First, we strive to find a solution to the immediate situation. Second, we attempt to assist the child process feelings, recognize consequences, explore alternative solutions and outcomes, and develop internal self-control. Guidance techniques that will be used with students enrolled in our program include setting clear and enforceable limits, modeling appropriate behaviors, structuring the environment and schedules to maximize positive behavior, recognizing children's efforts, anticipating timing of faculty intervention, redirection, appropriate timing of faculty intervention, planning the daily schedule in such a manner as to allow students a successful mixture of choice and structure, use of natural and logical consequences. Ethical conduct and confidentiality. Ethical conduct involves acting in ways consistent with what society and individuals typically think are good values. Ethical behavior tends to be good for business and involves demonstrating respect for key moral principles that include honesty, fairness, equality, dignity, diversity, and individual rights. Conduct unbecoming of any Victorum Learning Center family member will be dealt with swiftly. At no time should an employee feel threatened, bullied, harassed, or intimidated by verbal, written, or physical means. Any action occurring on company property, company time, or in the presence of children will cause an immediate termination. Confidentiality. Confidentiality is the state of keeping or being kept secret or private. Confidentiality in the workplace refers to sensitive information regarding students, families, faculty members, and all associated identifying documentation. Communications not intended to enhance the experience of students, families, or faculty members of Victorum Learning Center are not to occur between programs. Information necessary to operations will be transmitted by administration or upon the request approval of administration. In addition to communications, business trade secrets must be kept confidential and not shared with anyone outside the chain of command. This includes proprietary information, materials, functions, and procedures, as well as Victorum Learning Center private information. Those found in violation of either the ethical conduct or confidentiality expectations may be held liable up to and including prosecution. Property of Victorum Learning Center. All furnishings are the property of Victorum LLC. In order to loan an approved item for center utilization, written consent must be obtained by the employee from the Director of Operations. Submit a request through the Center Director and you will be notified if the request is approved or denied. Any item brought into the center that does not follow this specific protocol becomes the exclusive property of Victorum Learning Center and is forfeited by the employee. The item is considered a donation and will be utilized to enrich the experience for children and families. This includes any storage units, janitorial supplies, books, manipulatives, etc. All content created while in the employ of Victorum Learning Center is the sole property of Victorum Learning Center, as it was produced on paid time. This includes, but is not limited to, lesson plans, curriculum support items, decorative items, photos, etc. Professional development. Victorum Learning Center requires all faculty to be certified in infant and child CPR and first aid, in addition to the basic trainings required by Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. Victorum LLC will pay for the registration provided the employee successfully attends and completes the training within the initially scheduled time frame. Failure to attend or adequately prepare to be successful will result in the employee reimbursing Victorum LLC the entire registration fee. It will then be the employee's responsibility to complete the required course on their own time. Failure to carry valid certifications may endanger the employee's ability to provide services for Victorum LLC. All employees are required to complete 20 hours of Ohio-approved professional development per year to equal 40 hours within the individual biennium period. Please consult the Center Director for guidance on completing these requirements. Compensation, benefits, and expectation. Compensation. Victorum LLC seeks to attract, train, and retain the highest quality educators in the Dayton area. We offer above-market salary ranges to ensure the highest level of care and supervision, as well as education is delivered to our stakeholders. Stakeholders in Victorum Learning Center include children, families, employees of Victorum LLC, and the community as a whole. Wages are based upon measurable factors including, but not limited to, experience, education, certifications, and employment record. Due to the size and structure of the organization, traditional overtime pay is not awarded in time and a half calculation, but in a straight hourly wage. Benefits. Victorum LLC offers flexible schedules that meet the needs of the center and employees. 2 paid holidays are observed, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Victorum LLC also offers tuition discounts to employees, as well as the opportunity to earn paid time off. In order to be eligible, employees must have been employed in a full-time capacity for 12 consecutive months prior to the period PTO would be accumulated. Full-time employees who work their entire scheduled shift for the pay period will earn the equivalent of 40 hours paid time off at the end of the calendar year. Expectation. It is expected of all employees of Victorum LLC to be not only physically present, but present in the moment. Whether the task at hand is teaching, learning, cleaning, or providing customer service, the task is to be handled with the utmost of professionalism. Cellular telephones are to be utilized when not in the employ of Victorum LLC, apart from the administrator. It is also the expectation that employees of Victorum LLC will only provide services for Victorum LLC within the childcare or education industry. Employment within non-competing industries is permitted. Employees will have the cost of their mandatory background checks, BCI and FBI, deducted from their pay should they not complete at a minimum 12 consecutive months of employment. Employees of Victorum LLC are issued Victorum Learning Center branded tops as part of the company uniform. Upon termination of duties assigned by Victorum LLC, employees are expected to return all company property to include branded tops. In the event this is not followed, the cost of the tops, $20 per top, will be deducted from the employee's subsequent or final paycheck. Professionalism. Employees of Victorum LLC, and by way, Victorum Learning Center, are to be the utmost professionals in every situation. Our product is direct customer service, both to the child/student directly or the associated family members as well. Employees are expected to be hygienically sound, alert, free of infectious symptoms, and present in the moment. Uniforms will be employed in the manner of navy blue scrub style bottoms and an authorized Victorum Learning Center top. Whether interacting with a team member, a family member, a student, you are required to be the professional in all situations. This is the Victorum way. Disciplinary process. In the event an infraction against any member of the Victorum Learning Center family, including but not limited to students, families, faculty members, contractors, and community members, any number of methods may be utilized, including verbal communication, written documentation, leave without pay, termination, and prosecution. Victorum Learning Center will attempt to resolve conflicts at the lowest form possible and does not seek to engage in disciplinary action unless the infraction warrants the response. Faculty members may not be made aware of written documentation as they may be utilized for conversations during faculty evaluations as opposed to direct punitive actions. Ohio is a state that is identified as an at-will employment state. This means that, unless explicitly stated, both employer and employee may terminate the employment for any reason or for no reason at all, as long as it is not illegal to do so. Victorum Learning Center does not discriminate against anyone on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, pregnancy, religion, disability, age, marital status, AIDS, HIV status, or sickle cell. Personal device policy. Victorum Learning Center employees are not permitted to utilize their personal devices while performing duties in direct supervision of children, including being in ratio. Administrators are expected to maintain their personal device in the event of a time-sensitive communication with the Director of Operations. The use of personal devices is explicitly banned while on the clock and in the care of children. The center number may be given to emergency contacts in the event immediate communication is required. At the expressed consent of the center director, an employee may utilize their personal device at the center director's discretion. Adverse actions for use of personal devices may include, but are not limited to, verbal warning, written warning, and termination. Breastfeeding policy. Victorum Learning Center provides high-quality care and education services to children and families. We are an inclusive employer who prides itself on meeting the individualized needs of each child and family associated with our program. We support breastfeeding in our programs. Oftentimes, parents who have the flexibility with their occupations will come into the center on their break to feed their children. This practice extends to employees of Victorum Learning Center who have children enrolled in our program. Victorum Learning Center will provide flexible scheduling that provides coverage for nursing employees to express milk for their children, whether that be directly to the child or indirectly through pumping. We will provide a safe, clean environment that is not a bathroom and access to hand washing facilities while the employee is on break to express milk. The employee must be relieved of duties, clock out, and then be returned to duty when complete with their process. Employees may be present in their child's room, which they may be regularly assigned to while this routine is performed. The employee may not be directly responsible for other children during this time. It is the expectation that this break time for expressing breast milk will be used accordingly and will not be abused. In the event that it is determined that an abuse of the policy has occurred, the employee may receive a verbal warning, documentation, or termination. Employment policies. Employees of Victorum Learning Center will act in good faith in all interactions. Honesty and integrity are of the utmost importance. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are to provide 2 weeks' notice of termination of employment to ensure continuity of care for the children and families. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are to keep their payroll records up to date, and failure to submit changes in a timely manner may incur liabilities to payroll in excess of $250. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are required to appear presentable and professional at all times. Interactions are to be handled with the utmost sincerity and empathy that the interaction deserves. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are not to remove items from the center without expressed written consent by the Director of Operations. This includes all items. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are to maintain an absenteeism rate of 4% or below. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are expected to be on time every day and work until released by the center director or person in charge after the room has been properly closed. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are required to be present in the moment and utilize every possible opportunity to support learning for students. Employees of Victorum Learning Center will forfeit $80 if they or Victorum Learning Center terminate their employment prior to 12 consecutive months of employment. This is to reimburse Victorum LLC for the cost of the web check services, should Victorum LLC provide those web check services. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are required to contact the center director no less than 2 hours prior to a scheduled shift if they are unable to work. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are expected to follow all policies and expectations set forth by Victorum LLC, Victorum Learning Center, local, county, state, and federal guidelines. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are made aware that they are employed in an at-will employment state, and that either the employer, Victorum LLC or Victorum Learning Center, or the employee may terminate employment for any reason, to include none. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are to return all company-owned/issued equipment to include, but not limited to, branded uniform tops. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are to abide by all established and common sense laws, rules, and regulations set forth by Victorum LLC, city, state, and federal guidelines and laws while performing duties to include, but not limited to, operating motor vehicles, supervision of children, documentation, and reporting. Employees of Victorum Learning Center are not to be under the influence of marijuana or marijuana products to include vaping and edibles while on property. No one is to possess, store, or distribute any marijuana or marijuana products while on site, on the clock, working for, or with Victorum Learning Center. While marijuana and marijuana products are legal to recreationally possess and utilize by adults over the age of 21, Victorium Learning Center employees must be free of any and all intoxicating substances while engaged in employment-based activities. Employees of Victorium Learning Center are mandated reporters. During initial onboarding, the ODJFS Child Care Orientation video explains this requirement of all child care staff members. During your ODJFS Child Abuse 1-hour overview or 6-hour or 3-hour management training, it is also explained to you that you are a mandated reporter of suspected child abuse or neglect. In our handbooks, both employee and program, it also explains this mandate. All people who work with children, regardless of the agency or capacity, are mandated reporters and should do just that. Report suspicions of abuse or neglect to the area agency. If you cannot Google the number, report your suspicions to the local police department and they will connect you with the appropriate agency. You may not use "I wasn't aware" as an excuse. There are multiple posters in every building with specific instructions. Employees of Victorium Learning Center are made aware that this handbook is not exhaustive and that unique situations may present themselves and will be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Twice a year, the National Association of Colleges and Employers publishes a journal that outlines the job outlook for people that are graduating. In this report, employers have identified professionalism as a skill that is highly desired but sorely delivered by recent college graduates. So I encourage you to reflect, how would you define professionalism? In order to create a consistent message, NACE actually identifies and articulates what's called transferable skills. So like some of y'all may have outlined, the word professional is almost in the eye of the beholder. Here is the official definition of professionalism and work ethic as demonstrated by NACE. According to them, a professional demonstrates personal accountability and effective work habits. That includes punctuality, working productively with others, or teamwork as we'll call it, time management, and nonverbal communication, and its impact on your professional work image. A professional also demonstrates integrity and has ethical behavior. They act responsibly with the interactions of the larger community in mind and is able to learn from their mistakes. One reason that this definition matters is because of this chart right here. NACE also listens to the feedback from employers to point out skills that they desire, but it also tells you what or how the candidate actually performs in that area. You can see that professionalism is highly desired by the employer, but again, sorely under-reflected by recent college graduates. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually break apart different sections that make up a professional. So we know that it's important and it's something that the employers are looking for. Punctuality. All right, so what I'm going to do is I am going to offer a couple of scenarios for the rest of this presentation. And I want you to think about what maybe you want to do in this situation versus what you may actually need to do. So for our first scenario, punctuality. All right, so you've been working at your new company for a little over a month and your coworkers have finally invited you to go out for an event that's taking place after work. You jump at the opportunity to go with them because you really want to get to know the people that you're sharing the office with. But as the night goes on, you realize that it is almost 11 p.m., which is way beyond your normal wind down time. Then you realize that it's almost 2 a.m. by the time you get to bed. And as you're laying there trying to go to sleep, you realize that your alarm is going to sound at 6 a.m. Next thing you know, your alarm is ringing. Wow, what a quick night's sleep. But you are oh so tired from yesterday and last night. So you have two options. You can hit the snooze button and get maybe 10 more minutes of shut-eye, or you can get up and get moving. It is time to start your day. Again, reflecting on maybe what you want to do versus what you need to do, a professional is most likely going to go with option 2. They're going to be on time. This is something that cannot be stressed enough. To be early is to be on time, and to be on time is to be late. And of course, being late is just not an option. The next thing that makes up a professional is going to be the dress code. So here's our next scenario. As you are getting ready for work the next day, you are staring into the open abyss of your closet. You just can't seem to find anything that you want to wear to work. Your company does have a dress code, but from the looks of everyone else, they're not very tight on enforcing what other people wear, at least from your perspective. Usually, you're supposed to dress in slacks and a company labeled polo. But last week, you saw 3 people wearing jeans and open-toed shoes, which are not allowed. But surely you'll go unnoticed just like the other people that you saw last week, right? After taking a quick look at your calendar for the day, you see that you only have one meeting scheduled and it's virtual. What will they care? It's not like they can see your jeans anyways. When we think about what we want to do versus what we think we need to do, a professional always follows the dress code. So check with your employer on what is acceptable and what isn't. If you're questioning whether or not your outfit is appropriate, you likely shouldn't wear it. Appropriate language. So another scenario. You are at the office and you are preparing your morning cup of coffee at the Keurig. As you begin chatting with your coworker, you realize that you forgot to place your coffee mug under the pour spout, and hot coffee is spewing everywhere, all over this white tablecloth and down to the floor. Maybe thinking about what do you want to exclaim versus maybe what you need to do. Having appropriate language, no matter what, is something that you want to pay attention to as a professional. No matter how cool you and your supervisor may seem to be, always be sure to use the appropriate language, especially around them. Never say things that you wouldn't say, of course, around your precious grandmother or anybody else that you admire. Communication skills. So here's a scenario. You have been working on creating detailed instructions informing your customers that your company will be updating their current systems and that their user login page will be refreshed to reflect an easier way to sign into their account. In the instructions, you indicate in the first line that their account access information will not change. Only the look and the feel of the login page will change. Your instructions also include that the website may be offline starting at 2 a.m. this Sunday and will be fully functional and restored by 5 a.m. that same morning. You send these instructions via email to all of your account holders, and within 5 minutes, sure enough, you have a response. Stephen asks, what will my new account information be once this site is updated? Now again, you know that you've outlined the instructions very thoroughly. So when you're thinking about your communication, you may have an idea of maybe what you want to tell Stephen, but I encourage you to think about what you need to tell him. Employers want to see that you were able to communicate in a manner that reflects positively upon your company. This also includes written communication in the forms of letters or emails. All right, so for a positive attitude, last night you had planned a quiet dinner at the house to relax and to save a little bit of money while eating in. You were looking forward to using this really cool new Instapot that your roommate got and settling in for a night of watching Netflix. When you get off work, you walk out to your car and notice that your tire pressure looked low. You decided to head home, and honestly, you completely forgot about it. The Instapot meal was a success. You had leftovers for the next day, which you went ahead and packed for your lunch. Again, ways to start saving money. The next morning, you wake up to go to the gym. And as you start your car, all of a sudden, the dashboard indicates low tire pressure. Darn, that tire pressure must be a little bit lower than you thought. When you take a look at the tire, it is completely flat. You head back inside and ask your roommate to borrow their tire pump. After your new workout of filling up your tire, you head in and get ready for work. You have just enough tire pressure to make it to the tire shop, who you know will drive you to work once they fix your tire. Luckily, you make it to work in time and settle in for a productive day at work. Surely the tire cost will only set you back about $15. As you work away, you check your phone and see that you have a missed call from the tire shop, so you head into the break room to give them a call. Bad news. The tire is done for. They are unable to fix the flat because of where the hole is, so you need to purchase a brand new tire, which will set you back about $150, a little bit more than the $15 that you had anticipated. Again, when we think about having a positive attitude, you may think what you want to do, right? Versus what you need to do. And remember, you're at work, a place of business. So having a positive attitude is, of course, an attempt to leave your negative feelings at the door when you come to work, which we all know is easier said than done. Attempt to find the positives in your day and think about it. Identify one friend that you believe is positive influence on you and a friend that maybe is a negative influence. Also, I encourage you to think about how maybe you should handle these relationships and the impact that they may have on you as a professional. Let's move into attentiveness. Again, these are all different areas that make up a professional. So here's our scenario for attentiveness. Going back to the coffee experience this morning, remember when you spilled coffee all over the place because your cup wasn't under the Keurig? When you informed the administrative assistant that you had accidentally spilled coffee on the white tablecloth, he told you that it wasn't a problem and that the company laundry service would be by later that afternoon and he would let them know. When the laundry service arrived later that afternoon, a coworker happened to be walking by and saw them about to leave. The administrative assistant was on the phone and two people were in the lobby, and the laundry service didn't appear to have grabbed the white tablecloth. Of course, the coworker has no idea whether or not the administrative assistant was able to tell the laundry service that this tablecloth needed to be replaced. In this situation, especially in the industry where you will be consistently dealing with customers, attentiveness is vital. So acknowledging your customers and making sure that you are listening to them is so very important. But also, your coworkers can be considered customers as well. So in this situation, having this person help the administrative assistant out by making sure that the laundry service is being told about the tablecloth is a great way that you can be attentive to your office needs and to your coworkers. Having good judgment. So I encourage you to think about this situation. How would you handle if you saw two coworkers arguing in front of a customer? More importantly, arguing about something that's related or unrelated to the office. Using good judgment is something that a professional does regularly. So employers want to see that you can think on your feet and make objective decisions. Perhaps in this scenario, it'd be best to politely interrupt the two and ask them to take their discussion someplace else. Of course, in a professional way. Productivity. The definition of productivity is performing a function that adds value to the company. That's the definition. But what is an effective strategy that you can implement that will allow you to remain productive while you're at work? And how do you currently do this with your schoolwork? Of course, making sure that we're being productive and motivated is something that a professional does and strives for constantly. Productivity is the key in most any position that you're going to be holding. Productivity can be hindered by distractions such as visitors in your office, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, anything else that you have that may pop up as a notification on your devices is all going to be something that can impact your productivity in the day. As we think about responsibility and accountability, there is a different definition between the two. So for accountability, if you say that you're going to do something, do it. If you say that you will be at a meeting, be there. If you say you're going to go pick up the copies of the report, pick them up. Say what you mean and do what you say. As for responsibility, we feel as though responsibility and accountability do go hand in hand. Again, say what you mean and do what you say. If something goes wrong and it's on your shoulders, own up to it and don't push that off on somebody else. I want you to think about these situations in a work setting. If the copier is jammed, what should you do? And if the break room kitchen is dirty, what should you do? And if the office is attending a work function, what should you do? Those all tie into responsibility and accountability. Being versatile. So being versatile means being able to adapt to changes, big and small. And it's very important in the job. Not all things are going to run smoothly, and backup plans will be necessary. But as long as you stay flexible and versatile, transitions will be a lot simpler. The person that hires you may not always be your boss. Your company will not always have the same software. Changes will always be on the horizon. What are some ways that you can ensure your versatility? Being open-minded. Again, one of the key elements that support what a professional actually does. And I've got another scenario here for you. Your office is working on a collaborative project that involves other departments on site. After each weekly meeting, your team members complain the entire way back to the office about this new project and how they do not see why they should be told to work with this other department on the project. They can fix and complete the project without the other people much faster. You, on the other hand, feel excited about the opportunity to work with other people in the company. You are new to the team, but you can see how this could really build a great partnership with the other department, but clearly others do not. Open-mindedness, especially when working with customers, open-mindedness is absolutely important. Are you ever going to see eye to eye with everyone? Absolutely not. But as a professional, you can interact with individuals that do not have congruent beliefs and values as you, but you can still accomplish the task at hand. Last thing I want to chat about is the ability to collaborate. So the ability to collaborate. Employers like to know that you can work well with others. Remember, you are all going to have to play in the sandbox, so make sure you have a good relationship with your coworkers. Being able to work both alone and to be able to collaborate on a team is a very marketable skill. I encourage you to think about two of the most important characteristics that you want to see in a team member and explain how these characteristics contributed to the success of the project. As we kind of wrap up what makes up professionalism, I encourage us to think about the multi-generational workforce that we are all working in. Most offices have a mix of baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Yers, and now Generation Z, all working together, which has brought about some generational differences in education, upbringing, social norms, and values that can create gaps and lead to a misunderstanding or conflicts at times. In reality, a variety of perspectives in the workplace can actually benefit and strengthen an organization. Learning how to bridge these generational, cultural, and other diversity gaps is essential for your overall professionalism. So what do you think the older generation thinks of the younger generation? More importantly, probably you. You may have heard the words lazy, entitled, too casual, maybe a lack of loyalty or respect, need constant feedback, maybe unrealistic, maybe you're expected to go right to the top right away, maybe you lack punctuality, maybe the younger generation doesn't have the ability to dress for the position. But I also encourage you to step back and think, what does your generation think of the older generation? Sometimes the word inflexible, slow, set to their ways, technologically incompetent. Some of those terms may have been shared amongst your peers. Do you think that both of these ideas are always true? I encourage y'all to be mindful of different stereotypes. So how you manage the cultural divide in a professional manner. I encourage you to look past those stereotypes and find a common ground. Learn from each other and acknowledge and appreciate the differences between every generation. More importantly, promote intergenerational discussions so that everybody can be on the same page and learn more from each other. On this slide, you'll see a quick snapshot of 10 things that require zero talent. When we think about standing out as an above average employee, I encourage y'all to know that your degree and your technical skills will land you the job, but your work ethic will advance you. Work ethic is much more than simply showing up to your job and completing the assignment. It oftentimes is coupled with being a professional. So once you've landed your dream job, we're going to discuss a few ways how you cannot get fired for the most part. Okay, first and foremost, do not talk poorly of your coworkers, your company, your manager, or your job on social media or through word of mouth. No matter the size of the company, people will talk, and the wrong person will most likely find out what you said. Do not discuss your lack of motivation or other less than desirable behaviors while at work. Don't post anything on social media that you wouldn't want everyone to know about. Remember, once you post it online, consider it permanent. So if you lie to your boss about an emergency, but you really went to a party instead, that could result in termination, not to mention a tarnished reputation. Professionalism and the benefits in the classroom. When we think about how you can start putting professional into practice now, know that students should consider the classroom as their first introduction to professionalism. Being a student is your very first real job, so beginning to build your professionalism now is very important. The classroom offers ample opportunity to build professional skills, including presentations, guest speakers, and the ability to interact with professionals from the local community. Also, professionalism in the classroom could lead to the other opportunities if you put in the extra effort and give a good first impression. These opportunities could include letters of recommendation from your professor. So choose to network nicely. Professors know a lot of people, so if you impress, perhaps you can get a job referral. A personal referral increases your chance of getting hired to 1 in 10 instead of 1 in 300 from a large search engine, which are very much better odds. Remember that these are just a few things that encompasses what a professional is at work and what employers are looking for in an employee. So things like punctuality, dress code, appropriate language and communication skills, having a positive attitude and remaining attentive, using good judgment and remaining productive, taking responsibility and accountability for what you're doing, being versatile, remaining open-minded, and communicating and the ability to collaborate with others or teamwork. Again, these are all areas that tend to make up what a professional is.
You work just as hard at your job as everyone else, maybe harder, but does it ever seem like all your coworkers are getting promoted while you're just getting left in the dust? The truth is, sometimes being great at your job and working hard is not enough. More often than not, it's about presenting yourself more professionally so that your boss can start to see you as more of a leader. In this video, I'm going to explain how you can be more professional so you can have a better shot at getting that promotion and the recognition that you deserve. Hey guys, I'm Kyle from The Distilled Man. So if you want to be seen as a rising star at your company, you're going to have to put in some extra work. And I'm not talking about extra job-related duties at your desk, because if you're aiming for promotion, you're probably already giving your regular duties as much as you can. You're going to need to put in some extra effort to becoming a more professional employee. Bosses look for people who already demonstrate that they can be leaders before they're given extra responsibility. So without any further ado, here are my tips on how you can be more professional at work. And big thanks to Carl Friedrich for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. Number 1, walk and talk like a leader. What kind of person do you picture when you think of a leader? Probably not that woman who's slouched over her computer all day, or that awkward guy who avoids eye contact and won't say hi in the hallway. Leaders are typically charismatic and relatable. But that doesn't mean that you need to be loud or an extrovert to be a leader. In fact, I know plenty of leaders who are soft-spoken, but it does mean that you need to carry yourself with a certain level of confidence. Whenever you need to get up from your desk and walk somewhere, pay attention to your posture. Stand up straight, pull your shoulders back, make eye contact, and smile at everyone you pass. Good posture is important at your desk, too. No matter how hard you're working, it kind of sends the wrong message if a boss or a coworker comes over to your desk and they see you just slumped halfway down in your chair, right? Leaders also speak with confidence and purpose. If you find that your public speaking skills need some help, take a class, or you can check out my post on how to master public speaking. And if you find yourself using a lot of filler words like like, then you can check out my video on the topic to help make your speech more meaningful and more direct. Number 2, build meaningful relationships with your coworkers. So if you've been in your job for a while, it's easy to get into a routine where you just want to come in, get your work done, and get home as soon as possible. It's easy to isolate yourself from your coworkers if you aren't careful, so just take time to start a conversation with the people you work with. And not only those people at your level, but also those people who are maybe 1 or 2 steps above your level. People love to feel acknowledged, so if you work in a big company, try to get to know as many people by their first name as possible. Ask them about their pets, ask them about their kids' names, ask them what they did on the weekend, or maybe even ask a few of them if they want to go to lunch on Friday instead of sitting at your desk eating a sandwich. It's all about making connections. You're probably a great person, but if you don't take time to build relationships with people, then they're not going to know that. And bosses definitely take notice when people are well-liked by their peers. And they might even ask your coworker's opinion if you're being considered for promotion. So it helps to have as many people in your corner as possible. Number 3, and guys, this is a big one, stop writing crappy emails. So what you write at work says just as much about you as what you say. Keep your emails short and to the point. If you write a novel-length email, people are more likely to miss important information. Plus, it sends the message that you don't really respect their time. If you can say it in 3 sentences, why say it in 3 paragraphs? And speaking of not wasting people's time, try to refrain from getting involved in forwarding email chains and funny memes that your coworkers might be involved in sending. You want your writing to come across as professional at work. So if you're not the best writer, at least try to start by using a free program like Grammarly, which can help with some of the basics like spelling and grammar. There's also tons of books on how to write better business correspondence. This is one that I have that I enjoyed, but there's tons out there. And if you want more tips on how to write better emails, you can check out my post, How to Write Business Emails That Don't Suck, which I will link to in the description below. Lastly, you should never assume that any work emails you send are private. Assume that anyone in the company might read your email at some point. So trashing your boss or your coworker or your client, not exactly the best move. Number 4, and you've heard this before, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Aside from wearing a tuxedo to work, it's pretty hard to overdress for most office jobs. And you're way more likely to be considered for a promotion if you overdress versus being that weird guy who always wears a saggy Hawaiian shirt to work. Look at how your manager and other people at that level dress. Sometimes it might be as simple as upgrading from just wearing a dress shirt to maybe occasionally throwing on a tie or occasionally layering on a casual sport coat. Even if your company does casual Fridays, you still want to look more presentable and more professional than everyone else. It's not just the clothes that make a man either. Dressing well is important, but you also want to take a look at your accessories. A pair of scuffed shoes is going to detract from your look no matter how nice your pants and shirt are. Even the bag that you bring your lunch or your laptop to work in says a lot about you. Now imagine a well-dressed guy who brings a nice leather attaché to work every day. Now imagine that same guy using a leftover trash bag or grocery bag to bring his stuff in. Big difference. That's why I've partnered with today's sponsor, Carl Friedrich. They make professional-looking bags that can really take how you're perceived at work to the next level. Their Pallet C briefcase is just the right size. For an everyday bag, you don't want anything too bulky, but you also want it to be able to fit all your daily essentials like a 15-inch laptop, a notebook, some documents, and some other odds and ends. And I like that the contemporary design of the Pallet C is sophisticated enough to make a statement, but it's not over the top. Also, the Palissy is made from vegetable tanned Italian vachetta leather. So over time, it's going to darken and develop a beautiful, unique patina as you use it more. Carl Friedrich is based in London, but their products are handmade in Italy, and you can tell they put a lot of great care and attention in everything they do. Just one small example, the Palissy briefcase features a heavy-duty Raccani zipper, and each tooth in the zip has been individually brushed and shined before it's assembled on the chain. If you're interested, Carl Friedrich is offering a special discount to Distilled Man viewers for a limited time. Just enter offer code DM10 and you can save 10% off your purchase. And I'll go ahead and link to their website in the description below. Number 5, take on bigger challenges. So I've got a secret for you. It's rare for people to get promoted unless they're already doing the work. My friend Dustin told me a story about one of his friends. She was working at a company and the manager abruptly left her and her coworkers completely scrambling in chaos. And what she did is she stepped up and really took on the role and the responsibilities of that position without any increase in pay and without a change in title. Finally, after about 3 months, she was officially given the position and a big raise because she was the obvious choice for the job. So that's the kind of initiative that you need if you want to fast track yourself for promotion. Raise your hand to take on extra projects and do everything you can to help. Take ownership. That's how you get noticed. You should also have some idea of the bigger picture beyond your own role, so that way you can decide where you want to end up eventually. You might even want to talk to your boss about putting together a personal development plan that helps start grooming you for the position that you ultimately want. Instead of asking, when can I get promoted? Ask, what else do I need to do to start contributing at a higher level? Companies are often willing to provide training and courses to employees that show that kind of initiative. If you're in an entry-level position, you may not feel like there's a lot you can do to take on more challenges right away. To some degree, you will need to learn the basics of your role before you do any more, but there's always ways to go above and beyond. Looking at the efficiency of your job is a great place to start. If you can find a way to save your company time, money, or other resources, you'll put yourself in a very favorable position. Just be sure to focus more on how those improvements will benefit the company rather than focusing too much on being critical of the existing way of doing things. So that's it, guys. 5 tips to help you be more professional. Leave me a comment and let me know what you thought of this video. Maybe you have some other tips on how to be more professional at work. Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, please do me a favor, hit that like button. If you want to subscribe to the channel, you can do that by clicking right about here. If you just want to watch another Distilled Man video, you can click right about here. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.
For thousands of years, some of the smartest people in the world have been asking themselves versions of the same question. Why do we like what we like? Is there a formula for beauty, for popularity, for human affinity? And the ancient Greeks said, yes, of course there is. It's the golden ratio, 1.62, et cetera, to 1. And then the Enlightenment thinkers said, yes, of course there is. It's Kant's theory of aesthetics. But today, we don't have the golden ratio, we don't have philosophers, we have Google and Facebook. We have advertisers. And in the advertiser formula, the first variable is always novelty. This is a scientific fact. They actually went through, several decades ago, all of the words they could possibly find in all the advertisements that were out there. And the most common word in all of those ads wasn't buy, wasn't now, wasn't risk-free warranty. It was new. We are living in a cult of novelty. Companies want us to like new things, to buy new things, to crave new things. But the truth is that we don't like novelty. In fact, we hate it. According to the mere exposure effect, one of the oldest and most robust theories in the history of psychology, the mere exposure of any stimulus to you over time will bias you toward that stimulus. In English, familiarity good. And indeed, when you think about it, we seek out new songs. But the songs that we most reliably enjoy are those with familiar chord structures and timbres. We seek out new movies, But every year this century, a majority of the top 10 films in America have been sequels, adaptations, or reboots. Familiar, familiar, familiar. In fact, maybe the best proof of the power of familiarity is that thing that is so familiar to you, your own face. It turns out that people prefer the face they see in mirrors to the face they see in photographs. Maybe you have a friend who complains constantly about how he or she looks in Facebook photos, but is often constantly admiring his or herself in the mirror. Well, this is not pure vanity. This is mere exposure effect. The face is slightly asymmetric. We see different versions when we see a reflection versus a photo. And if you're not a celebrity, then the version you're most used to seeing is not in a photograph, but rather in the most common reflection in the world, in a mirror. You prefer that version of your face not because it's you at your most beautiful, but because it's you at your most familiar. In fact, the power of familiarity seems so deep that people think it must be written into our genetics. The evolutionary theory for the preference for the familiar is that if you're a hunter-gatherer and you're trawling the savanna of Africa and you see a plant or an animal and you recognize it, that's a very good sign that plant or animal has not killed you yet. So, of course, you should prefer it. But this creates an enormous problem for creators, for creative types. Because I just told you that people only like new things if they're just like old things. So the question before us today is, how do you balance familiarity and surprise in such a way as to design hits, to design things that people love? Is it possible to engineer a familiar surprise? And to begin to answer that question, I want to tell you a short story about a man who is a hero of mine, a hero of my book, but also a man that I would imagine 90 to 95% of this room does not know. His name is Raymond Loewy, and he designed the 20th century. Raymond Loewy was a French orphan who came over to the United States after World War I. And his brother picked him up in a cab. And this is in the 1920s, where they drive down to downtown Manhattan, where one of the tallest buildings down there is the Equitable Building, which looks a bit like a tuning fork with sort of two large buildings rising into the sky. And Raymond Loewy takes an elevator to the top of this building, and he looks out over Manhattan from this vista. And he's expecting from his dreams in Paris to see a world that is beautiful, that is round, that is feminine. But the New York that unfurls in front of him is the exact opposite. It's grungy, it's noisy, it's the hulkiness of the industrial age. And Loewy makes a promise to himself and his brother. He says, I'm going to devote the rest of my life to beautifying America in my image. And Loewy did just that. Raymond Loewy designed the most famous car of the 20th century, the 1953 Studebaker. He designed the most famous train and locomotive of the 20th century, the Pennsylvania Railroad GG1. He designed the modern Greyhound bus and the modern tractor, the modern Coca-Cola fountain. He designed that pencil sharpener that looks like an egg with a little spindle coming out of it that you've seen in 100,000 classrooms. He designed the logos for Exxon and USPS. He basically designed all of 1950s Americana. And in fact, one day, Raymond Loewy was hanging out with his friend, and he saw the president's plane take off, and he said, "It looks gaudy." So President Kennedy invited Loewy to the Oval Office, where they sat on the floor and cut little papers until they achieved the perfect design for Air Force One. And in fact, the design that Raymond Loewy came up with there on the floor of the Oval Office with JFK still adorns the most famous plane in the world today. So the question is, what did this man possibly understand about human psychology, that he knew what we wanted from planes and trains and automobiles? This man was like Don Draper meets Steve Jobs for the 20th century. He understood everything. And fortunately for us, Raymond Loewy had a grand theory of everything. It was called Maya, M-A-Y-A, most advanced yet acceptable. Raymond Loewy said that human preferences are torn between two opposing forces. On the one hand, there is neophilia, a love of new things, an appreciation for the new, a need to discover. But on the other hand, there is neophobia, a fear of anything that is too new, a deep conservativeness. And Lowy said that in order to make hits, you need to make products that live right at that intersection of the familiar surprise. To sell something familiar, you have to make it surprising. But to sell something surprising, you have to make it familiar. Now, Lowy was not a scientist, but this theory has been proved and validated by scores of studies and meta-studies since he died. It has been used to explain hits in technology, in academics, in culture, and even in politics. Let's start with technology. Technologists are often in the position of having to make something new and then make that new thing popular with an audience that doesn't understand it. This was the problem recently at Spotify. Spotify, obviously the famous streaming music company, which was developing its app, which probably many people in this audience have used, called Discover Weekly. If you haven't used Discover Weekly, every single Monday, Spotify will dump 30 songs onto your phone. And initially, they wanted those 30 songs to be entirely new, so that people had never heard the songs and they had never heard the artists. But when they were initially testing it, there was a bug in the algorithm that accidentally let slip through some familiar songs and some familiar artists. So they quickly fixed the bug and they kept testing. But what happened is that when they kept testing the app, once they'd fixed the bug, engagement with the app plummeted. It turned out that having just a little bit of familiarity in this discovery platform made it significantly more popular. To sell that which was surprising, they had to make it familiar. 2, academics. I'd imagine that most academics don't think of themselves as hit makers. They don't think of themselves as operating in a cultural marketplace. But in order to become a star in your discipline, you often need to be published by the most famous publishers. And therefore, you are essentially giving up your research, proposing your research to people who are essentially your audience. So in 2014, a group of researchers from Harvard University and Northwestern wanted to figure out what is the formula for a hit paper. They wanted to figure out what sort of paper was most likely to be accepted by the NIH. Was it really, really novel proposals, or was it extremely familiar ones? So they created a dummy list of 150 papers, and they coded each of them for novelty, and then they delivered those papers to a group of 150 researchers who scored their favorites. And the graph of that score looks a bit like an upside-down U. Over here, you have utmost familiarity. Over here, you have utmost novelty. But it turned out that the researchers who were evaluating these proposals, they too preferred that which they called optimally familiar, advanced, yet acceptable. Maya. 3, identity. In my book, Hitmakers, I spent a long time trying to figure out this issue of why do fashions exist? Indeed, if the brain is an organ of ancient chemistry, then why should we change our opinion of what is good? But of course we do. Guitar solos are weird in the 1930s, extremely popular in the 1970s, and then weird again in the 2000s. Skinny jeans are unpopular, and then popular, and unpopular, and popular, and they follow this sine curve. So why does this happen? Well, it's really important to understand that for the vast majority of human history, fashions really didn't exist. People wore the same clothes for centuries, for millennia. It never occurred to people wearing togas that they should somehow change the look of their toga from one decade to the next. But a really interesting way to look at fashion is to say, all right, well, let's say people clearly do have different, clothing fashion preferences, but let's imagine a make-believe store. And at this store, all clothes simply exist, they all cost the same price, and there is no marketing. And it's important to think about this store sort of in your head because as an economic writer, I often think, all right, well, to explain fashion, I would think that it must be explained by price or by the fact that J. Crew doesn't want you to wear a certain kind of pant anymore, so they take it away. Or they want you to wear a new kind of pant, so they market it. But imagine with me this magical store where all of the clothes exist and they're all the same price and marketing is impossible. Well, in fact, that store exists here in the real world. It is the marketplace of first names. Think about it. All first names exist. They all cost the same price, and there's no direct marketing. Nike really, really wants you to buy its next shoe, but there's no advertisement in Nike history that has ever said, oh, and after you buy your shoe, would you please name your baby girl after the Greek goddess of victory and speed? It's never happened. So why do first names follow the same hype cycles as clothes? So a sociologist named Stanley Lieberson investigated this, and he came up with a really interesting theory that essentially just went right back to Maya. He found that people tend to prefer names that are familiar surprises. So take a name like Samantha. Samantha in the 1980s was not a particularly popular name. It was about the 30th most popular baby girl name in the country. But just enough young couples decided that that was a perfectly popular name for their baby girl that in 1992, 222,000 couples named their baby girl Samantha, making it the second most popular baby girl name of that year. But then think about what happens 5 years later. All these little Samanthas go into kindergarten together, and the kindergarten is suddenly just run amok with Samantha, 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 when all these parents thought they were giving their daughter a unique name. And so since most parents have a preference for names that are familiar but also surprising, the name Samantha naturally, without any organization, rises in popularity and then falls. One of the more interesting proofs for the fact that parents have a specific taste for popularity is that siblings tend to have similarly common or uncommon names. And this is intuitively true. If you meet the siblings, Michael, Emily, and Sarah, it's a little bit strange if they say, and this is our sister, Xanthopy. But if you meet the siblings, Xanthopy, Prairie Rose, Esmeralda, it's very strange if they're like, also, here's our brother, Chad. Parents have a specific taste for familiarity. But one of the most interesting proofs of this naming theory is looking at the phenomenon of baby girl names for Black Americans. For the vast majority of human history, for American history, blacks and whites had similar names. But starting in about the 1960s, there was a great forking where some names began to sound white and other names sounded black. And one of those markers for a black name is the LA or LE prefix, like for LeBron James or LaDainian Tomlinson. But this was basically unheard of before the 1960s. But Stanley Lieberson found that starting in 1967, 8 distinct black baby girl names peaked in popularity with a La prefix. And they peaked in the following order: Latonia, Latanya, Latasha, Latoya, Latrice, Lakeisha, Lakeisha, Latricia. And what's so fascinating about the sequence is just how orderly it is. Every next popular name is a play on what came before it. It takes the familiar and it makes it surprising. Fourth, politics. In this age of hyper-partisanship and polarization, there is an enormous demand to figure out how people can talk to each other, how we can persuade each other. But often when we get into debates, when we get into discussions, and we try to persuade someone of our point of view, we begin with our code of ethics. So if you're a liberal, you'll say you shouldn't like Donald Trump because his policies are cruel to Hispanics. Or if you're a conservative, you might say you shouldn't like Bernie Sanders because he's trying to turn us into Denmark. Now, on its face, these statements are perfectly genuine and sincere, but they fail immediately as articles of persuasion, because if you're a conservative who supports Trump, you probably like those policies that are discriminatory. And if you're the liberal supporting Bernie Sanders, you kind of want to nudge the US toward Denmark. But imagine if instead we invert the process and we begin with the code of ethics of the person that we're talking about. We piggyback off of their familiarities. So if you're talking to someone as a liberal, and you're talking to someone who supports Donald Trump, you might say, one of the things that I've always respected about the Republican Party is their emphasis on patriotism, putting country over self, and seeking service. Help me think through times in Donald Trump's business career. He's been a paragon of these values. Now, you might not create a Bernie Sanders supporter on the spot. You might be slapped for insouciance. But you're going to get a lot farther following this path than you are putting forth first principles that the person you're speaking to disagrees with. The model that I've just proposed is called the moral foundations theory. And it says essentially that it's always more beneficial when debating with somebody else to begin with their first principles, to begin with their code of ethics, and then show how slow walking those code of ethics toward the center might make their position leak into your position. All debate involves a form of ideological advertising. And in both polemics and in products, to make it Maya, make it familiar. The last story I want to tell takes us back to Raymond Loewy. And it takes us back to his last assignment as an industrial designer. Raymond Loewy was told to design the interior habitat for the first NASA space orbital, the most surprising and unfamiliar and exotic environment you could possibly imagine a human being in deep space. And Loewy conducted a bunch of habitability studies, and he made some tweaks here and some tweaks there, but his most famous contribution to space history is that he cut a hole in the side of the NASA space orbital. He placed a sheet of glass there and created a viewing portal for Earth. Yes, that viewing portal that you have seen in all of those movies, that too is Raymond Loewy's innovation. And I cannot think of a more perfect illustration for Maya or a more beautiful inspiration to creators everywhere, because it says that a window to a new world can also show you home. Thank you.
So Maya is just such an interesting concept with so many unique applications. I'm wondering, do you think that there are ways to apply this idea to help people from diverse backgrounds better relate to each other?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the ideas that comes up in developmental psychology is this issue of sensitive periods, that people develop tastes, develop their particular familiarities during specific periods in their life, which tends to be relatively young. People tend not to change their taste in music or their taste in food after the age of 40 or 50. So when thinking about this question of justice, it's important sometimes to not only focus on adults, not only trying to remediate adults, but also realizing that the way to get liberal-minded people, the way to get people who think multiculturally and embrace those of all stripes and colors and creeds is actually to have a kind of cradle-to-grave strategy, where you say we should build neighborhoods. We should focus on neighborhoods and build neighborhoods where you have a combination of ideologies and colors and creeds and all of this. So I think sometimes we think of justice as purely remedial, and of course there's lots of people doing very important work there, but it's also so important that we think about taste formation, even on important issues like politics, as being a project that involves the neighborhood level.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you ever notice that moment where you've won over that prospect? But on the other hand, have you ever seen the look on their face when you just clearly lost them? There is truly a psychology to selling effectively. Yet most salespeople don't know exactly what they're doing correctly that's making people more attracted to them versus incorrectly that's actually repelling prospects away from them. In this video, I'm going to show you the psychology of selling, the 13 steps to selling that actually works. Check it out. Number 1, drop the enthusiasm. This is probably my biggest passion in this sales training space, is getting salespeople to drop the enthusiasm, to drop the excitement when they're in front of prospects. Your prospects don't like it. They don't enjoy it. They don't feel good about it because it doesn't seem real, right? If I go up to you, just forgetting a sales situation, but let's just say I come up to you at a networking event, right? And I come up and I introduce myself and I say, hi, my name's Mark. It's nice to meet you, right? Simple introduction. What if on the other hand, I come up and I say, hey, Mark Wayshak, how are you? You're like immediately like, what? That feels weird. And then when you add it into a selling situation, immediately your prospect is going to be repelled. It actually is caused by a psychological phenomenon called reactance, where when we're clearly trying to push someone in one direction, they're going to resist. They're going to pull back. And so we want to drop that enthusiasm and instead just be real, be genuine. Number 2, they don't want the pitch. Some very recent data showed that one of the biggest reasons that prospects and buyers don't ultimately choose to do business with a salesperson is that they felt that the salesperson didn't really understand their needs, their concerns. And yet what most salespeople are doing is when they first meet that prospect, they're coming in with that pitch. They're coming in with all of the reasons why someone should do business with them in the first place, when we don't actually know if it's a fit. We haven't done that proper discovery to understand what's really going on. And so what your prospect really wants at the end of the day is they want to be engaged in a conversation about what's going on, what's really important to them, and what those challenges actually look like to them. And then, if based on that conversation, they still feel like it's a fit, now it's presentation time. Now it's time to present what that solution looks like. Think of it almost as a doctor's type of a conversation. You go to the doctor and the doctor's not saying, hey, we have this incredible new procedure, right? Instead, they're just saying, hey, so tell me, where are you feeling that pain? What's going on? Help me understand, right? And it's a two-way dialogue and it's not about the pitch. Number 3, pressure is a no-no. Now, growing up, we would always use the term no-no. That's a no-no. And I still think about pressure in sales as the same idea here, is that we don't want to be putting pressure on prospects because it's a no-no, because it is such a taboo. It is such a bad thing that it's not just not helpful, it's actually killing the sale. So what we want to do is remove all pressure from the selling situation. Instead of trying to persuade the prospect to tell us yes, where we're immediately, as a result, putting all this pressure onto them, instead we want to take a step back. It's like I said earlier, there's this concept called reactance in psychology, where in any situation, when we're trying to push someone to do something and they know we're doing that, they're immediately going to want to pull back. Think about trying to get your kids to do something, or your spouse, or someone that you know, trying to push them into something that they're not really sold on yet. If they feel like you're putting pressure, there's a good likelihood that they're actually going to pull back. Well, that's the exact same thing with selling to a prospect. If we're putting pressure on, they're actually going to pull back. What I suggest is you take all that pressure off and instead just ask questions to determine whether there's actually a fit. Number 4, it's about them, not you. Now, this goes back to one of these really old ideas. There was a boss that I had who used to say, prospects listen to one radio station, and that one radio station is WIIFM. Now, do you know what WIIFM stands for? It's what's in it for me. That's what prospects care about. They don't care about you. They don't care about your offering. They don't care about your products or your services or how great your service is. What they care about is themselves. Is this conversation going to be A, worth my time, and B, is their solution going to actually help me solve a problem that I care about? If they can't answer affirmatively to either or both of those questions, then you're in trouble. We've got to make the conversation about them, understanding their concerns, asking questions about their challenges, the things that they care about. And then when they see that it's about them, now they're going to be engaged in a conversation, because people like to talk about themselves. People like to talk about their concerns or their goals or whatever it is that they're looking to accomplish. By making it about them and not your offering, now we're in a position where we're much more effective. Number 5, get in their shoes. Some really powerful data has shown that top performers are much more effective at taking the perspectives of their buyers. And so, when's the last time you've really thought through what's the experience, what's the buying experience that my buyer goes through when talking to me or when talking to my competitors? So again, I'm not talking about what's the value proposition or what's your product experience. I'm talking about the actual experience of buying from you. What's it feel like? What's good? What's not good? Get in their shoes. Start to think more like your buyers. What do they care about? What are the challenges that they're facing? What are the reasons that they do business with you? What are the reasons they do business with your competitors? Understanding that, and suddenly we're now really getting into the mind of our buyer. And so when we talk about the psychology of selling, it's literally how can we start to think like our prospect? How can we really understand what they care about and then craft our conversations around what they care about? Number 6, we need to create value through our questions. When you watch those scenes in The Sopranos, if you've ever watched the show The Sopranos, and you watch the conversation between Tony Soprano and his psychologist, it's really interesting from a sales perspective as I watch it, because the psychologist is never saying the solution. Tony says he's got a problem or he's concerned about this, and then the psychologist says, well, so help me understand why you say that, or how does that make you feel? Now, these aren't necessarily the exact questions that we want to be using in sales, but what you see is that most salespeople, when a prospect comes to us and says, I've got this problem, most salespeople say, well, you're in the right place. We've got this awesome new suite of products that are going to help you. Instead, take a step back and create value not through what you're saying, what you're pitching, but instead create value through the questions you're asking. Help me understand why you say that. What would you say this challenge is costing you? Or if you were able to solve this problem, what would it mean in additional revenue or additional profitability? Create the value through the questions, not through the pitching of your ROI or the pitching of the value that your service offers. Really do it through the questions, not through just the actual statements you're making. Number 7, no isn't bad. Let me repeat that. No isn't bad. This is so important as a concept in sales, is that most salespeople spend their entire lives trying to avoid rejection, trying to avoid the prospect ever saying no. And yet when you think about it, there's no reason to feel that way. No isn't a bad thing. Because the reality is that about at least 50% of your prospects are not a good fit. Our data shows that at least 50% of the people that you initially come across are not going to be a great fit for whatever it is that you're selling. And so with that said, we want to get to know as quickly as possible with those 50% that aren't a good fit. So if it ultimately turns out that it just isn't a fit, try to identify that as early as possible and consider that a victory that it wasn't a fit. Because top performers are spending the majority of their time in front of qualified prospects, in front of the prospects that want to do business with them. And so the only way that that can be ensured happens is to make sure that when you come across someone who's not a fit, is that you disqualify them and you move on. And what this also does is it takes off all that pressure. It takes off all that pressure that the prospect is feeling to do business with you. And instead, you're basically saying, look, I'm not sure if this is going to be a fit. Help me understand what's going on. And now the prospect feels so much more comfortable. From a psychology perspective, you've taken all that pressure off, and now they feel good about this interaction. And at the same time, you can too, because you know that if it's not a fit, you move on. If it is a fit, we're going to explore exactly how it's a fit. Number 8, if you feel it, say it. Let me repeat that. If you feel it, say it. One of my mentors used to always say this, and it's just stuck with me as so true, and quite frankly, even more true in today's selling environment, where there's just no time for wasting time with tire kickers or people that just aren't a fit. If your prospect is talking in a way that's making your gut say, you know what, there's something not right here, rather than just push through, just say it. Just get it out on the table, whatever it is that you're feeling. And I don't mean to say that this has to be confrontational, but let's say your prospect it seems like they're just not into this. Maybe the timing's not right, or they're not interested, or they just seem distracted in the meeting. Say it. Say, George, I really appreciate your sitting with me today, but it seems like you're pretty distracted right now. Is this maybe not a good time to be talking about this? And watch them suddenly say, oh, no, I'm sorry I was distracted, but no, I do want to have this conversation. Or if they seem like they're just not interested in what you're talking about, you say, George, I get the sense that this just doesn't seem to be of a lot of interest to you. Is that fair to say? And now they may say, yeah, you know what? No, I'm not interested. And then you can say, okay, well, tell me why you say that, right? So you dig in there. But they may also come back and say, oh, no, this is definitely something that I want to talk about. It's amazing how you get to the point so much quicker by saying what you're feeling. If you feel it, say it. Number 9, get deep into their challenges. There is something that I've been saying for years, that we need to think like a doctor. We need to stop thinking like a salesperson and start thinking like a doctor. And this idea of getting deep into their challenges, I think, addresses that exact concern. Is that the typical salesperson, prospect comes to them and says, oh, we have this operational challenge. Do you think you can help us? And the typical salesperson says, absolutely, we can help you. We'd happily give you a suite of offerings, whatever. But they're not going into the challenges. They just deal with they identify a surface level challenge and then they offer the solution. Versus the professional salesperson who thinks like a doctor. And so the prospect says, yeah, we've got these operational issues. Do you think you can help us? And the doctor says, well, tell me more about those challenges. Help me understand what's going on. Dig deeply. Think of it as an iceberg, right? And most prospects are willing to discuss what's at the very top of the iceberg to anyone. And what we want to do is go deeper and deeper and understand what's really going on to get deep into those challenges. Using psychology, using effective questions to get into the core challenge that they're facing. Number 10, tie those challenges to value. Tie those challenges to value. So we've talked about going deeper to really understanding what's going on. And now what we want to do is tie those challenges to a specific value. What is it that if they could solve this challenge, what would it mean in value to them, in upside revenue or profitability or savings? Here's an example. Prospect is talking about their marketing challenges, right? And they're saying, yeah, we're just, our marketing is just not as effective as we'd like. We just feel like we're not getting the number of leads that we'd like. And so now you as a salesperson, you dig into those challenges and all that. And then you say something along the lines of, well, George, if you were able to solve these challenges that you're facing, what would it mean in additional revenue to the organization? And so now what you're doing is giving the prospect the opportunity to come back with a number, right? They might say, oh yeah, well, we could easily increase revenue by a couple $1 million if we were able to solve these challenges. Now you've tied the challenges to some kind of specific tangible value. And it's their number. It's their number. And by the way, even if you're on the consumer side, you're selling to consumers, there's still a value in solving their challenges. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a number, but what is that value to solving those challenges? Or what is that challenge really costing them right now? Number 11, make it a two-way dialogue. Psychology shows us that when people are actually speaking, that's when they're most engaged. When they're listening, they're maybe engaged, but they're less likely to be really engaged. So what you want to do is, even when you're presenting, you want it to be a back and forth. You want it to be a two-way conversation where there's never a period where you're just going on and on and on and on and talking about your service or your product or your offering or the value that you create. You want to only be going on for a little bit and then re-engaging them back into the conversation. If it is truly a two-way conversation, you are going to close a lot more of your sales because it means that they have to be engaged if it's a two-way dialogue. Keep that back and forth. Anytime you present something, say something like, so now that I've shown you that, I want to understand, does that make sense based on what we're talking about? Get them back into the conversation. Number 12, budget comes later. This is one of the most important things, is that we don't want to start our conversation by talking about our price or talking about money at the beginning of the conversation. We want that to come at the end of the discovery process. And so what that would look like is we've gone through the challenges, we've gone through what the upside value is, we've gone through really understanding the whole issue, and now it's time to talk about budget. And so you might ask a question like, George, typically a solution, based on what I'm hearing the challenges are, typically a solution for what we've discussed could range anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000. Where on that spectrum could you see yourself fitting? And so now what you've done is you've given a range of potential budgets. And by the way, it's a pretty big range, $100,000 and $500,000, huge range. And now we're letting them come back and say, oh, I feel like I could, potentially 300 or 100. And if you've really built an effective connection throughout your process, you're going to get that answer. You're going to get that insight. Make sure that it's coming later in the process, though, after you've really built that connection, after you've really built that value. Number 13, feedback loops. Feedback loops. And so I said earlier, we want to make our presentation a two-way dialogue. And the feedback loops are simply those little questions when we're talking to people that are pulling them back into that conversation. And feedback loops are something that I use all the time with every single person in my life because it's so effective. If you ever find yourself going on and on or talking for more than, let's say 60 seconds, stop and just say, so before I go any further, does this make any sense? Or do you see what I'm saying? Or does that work for you? Right? These little questions that are pulling people back into the conversation. The data shows that these little questions are not only re-engaging people in the conversation, but it's also creating little moments of buy-in. Basically think of them as almost like a mini close in the conversation. And so you're pulling them closer and closer and closer. So that way by the end of the presentation, assuming they've been on the same page with you and they like what you're saying, then the only question to close is, what would you like to do next? There is no hard close because you've used these feedback loops all throughout the process, and now all you're doing is just establishing what's the next step. So there is the psychology of selling, the 13 steps to selling that actually work.